Hello, welcome. We're just going to give a few minutes for everybody to join us. We've got quite a huge number, so I think we're going to wait for 2 more minutes for people to join in. In the meantime, why don't you tell me where in the world you're joining us from? What can you see outside of your window? I think I'm going to start. I'm in sunny South Africa. It's been raining for the last few days, so outside of my window today is beautiful sunshine. Looking at the beautiful garden and things are blooming. That's me. Who's next? Ah, there we go. Sarajevo, India, Cape Town, England. Lovely to have so many people from all over the world. Philippines. Cool. We'll give it 1 more minute. Sunny Mauritius, welcome. Nigeria. Uganda, Kenya. As soon as the clock hits 8:03, we're going to start. Here we go. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome everybody to this crucial webinar on the Global Knowledge Support Service for Biodiversity. My name is Santuri Naidu, and I am a Program Officer in Policy Innovation at UNEP-WCMC, and I lead the development of this knowledge service. Today, I am so thrilled to see so many passionate individuals joining us from across the globe. Biodiversity is the very fabric of life on Earth, and sustaining it has never been more important. As we all know, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework Package of Decisions was adopted in 2022. And this sets an ambitious and vital roadmap to address the biodiversity crisis that puts us on a pathway towards living in harmony with nature. But ambitious goals and targets require robust support and knowledge to inform decision-making. And that is what we hope that this knowledge service will do for you. UNEP-WCMC has engaged CBD parties worldwide through extensive consultations. We dove deep into your needs and challenges on monitoring the implementation of the KMGBF. Your insights have been invaluable in shaping this service, and today we are incredibly excited to share this progress with you. For those of you that attended our side event at the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, we are sharing our presentation from that side event to a wider audience via this webinar today. Over the next hour, we'll delve deep into some specifics of the online element of the knowledge service and how it will function, and most importantly, how it will benefit you. This is your opportunity to ask questions and share your perspectives and help us to further shape this vital resource. So, welcome again, and let's get started. First up, we have Pratik Pandan, Communications Officer specializing in policy communications at UNEP-WCMC, to take you through some housekeeping. Pratik, take it away.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, we would be recording this webinar. If you have any issues with this, please let us know. And with regards to your microphone and camera, your microphone will be muted throughout the webinar. If you would like to comment or ask a question during the Q&A session, or also during throughout the webinar, we encourage you to please use the Q&A feature, which is accessible from the bottom of your screen. And lastly, if you have any technical issues, please send a direct message to me. I am from the events team at UNEP-WCMC. Thank you and welcome to the webinar. Santuri, over to you.
Thanks, Pratik. Up next, we have Ms. Natasha Ali, Head of Policy. So Natasha is the interim Head of Policy, and she leads UNEP-WCMC's policy team. In a technical capacity, Natasha coordinates a portfolio of projects about indicators that are used for tracking progress towards national and global goals, such as the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Sustainable Development Goals. She has a long history of international policy experience, and through her work with the UK government, IUCN, and the private sector. Natasha, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Santuri. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you what is early in the morning in the UK. So we just wanted to update you really following our presentations over the last couple of years at various meetings of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and ahead of the upcoming resumed session of COP16, we wanted to provide a bit of an update on what we're doing, and an opportunity for people to provide feedback, and to keep in touch with us as we move through the process. So next slide, please, Pratik. So by way of background, throughout the negotiations of the Kunming to Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the package of decisions related to that, including the associated monitoring framework, parties to the CBD, that's governments, noted a need for capacity building in various areas and technical and scientific cooperation. And in particular, we're focusing around the needs of countries related to monitoring. And so UNEP-WCMC undertook a scoping study to understand better the needs of parties in relation to knowledge and the access to information and knowledge to help inform decision-making related to implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Next slide, please. And the consultation process started in 2022. We established an informal advisory group of individuals, either from national biodiversity institutes or representatives from government and partner organisations who are responsible for providing information and data to help decision making. And we also had bilateral conversations with governments in 2022. We had a couple of side events at CBD COP15, where we had a roundtable discussion. Parties expressly shared their concerns about capacity needs for implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework and about knowledge and access to knowledge. Then we had a co-design workshop in April 2023, and we worked on the designs following that co-design workshop, which we shared with parties at CBD COP16 during a side event. And as Charlotte will explain, as we move forward now, we're going to move into more technical user consultations throughout this year. And this is an opportunity, this window is now an opportunity to provide further feedback as we move forward with the designs. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick summary of what we heard from governments in terms of what the needs are from a knowledge service. Essentially, there's a need for information across all layers of society, all levels of society. And the countries were asking for facilitated access to some of the tools, recognising there's a lot of information out there, but what governments really wanted to hear was, which tools do I use and how and when, and how do I easily access the information that's available through these tools? There was an overwhelming ask for increased digitisation and standardisation of data and knowledge and interoperability between those tools. There was a request to strengthen national biodiversity knowledge management capacity through various different approaches. Next slide, please. And what we did, because there was quite a lot of information and requests made during this period, we had to focus on an area. And so in this phase of development, we've decided to focus on the monitoring framework. And the reasons for this are quite numerous. So the first is that we undertook a capacity needs assessment, this is UNEP-WCMC, ahead of COP15. And then we did it again for COP16. And that was around the use of the monitoring framework. And you can see the results of that capacity needs assessment, which was completed in collaboration with the ad hoc technical expert group on indicators and the CBD Secretariat. And the results are available at information document 14 for information document 4 for COP16. And that capacity needs assessment identified that there is a need for parties to have information about how to collate the data how to manage the information that is used to develop and use the indicators, the headline indicators of the monitoring framework. But overwhelmingly, I think there was a general need for support for countries across the whole data value chain, from data collection, management, and then to use. And the other reason we prioritise monitoring at this stage is because we know now that parties will start to compile their 7th national reports to the CBD. So what we wanted to do was try and streamline as much information to help parties with that process from the get-go, essentially. Next slide, please. And we put this in the context of the work that UNEP-WCMC is already doing. So we have various programs where we've been helping countries with monitoring implementation of global goals and targets at the national scale. And one in particular is the National Monitoring Support Initiative, which started in 2023 and supported by the International Climate Initiative. UNEP-WCMC is working to support as many parties as we can, but at least 10, with building their capacity for biodiversity monitoring. And we do this through our network. We've got a global support network of individuals and organisations who have expertise in monitoring through the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership. And we will help countries to effectively monitor implementation of their national targets through their NBSAPs, National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, and help them with reporting. And we hope to see that capacity building exercise increase capacity and improve national reporting. Next slide, please. And the nodes of the National Monitoring Support Initiative are on the slide, so I won't read them verbatim, but I will just say the first step in this process is to assess that individually, the national capacity of each country. We then establish a national action plan for that country. We establish peer-to-peer exchange with organisations who are working on national monitoring and who can provide training and support to countries. And at the end of this process, as I said, the idea is to leave behind enhanced national capacity for monitoring. But we recognise that within the timeframe of the project, we're not going to be able to deliver everything or meet all countries' needs. So another take home from the project is hopefully that there will be a sustainability plan at the national level with recommendations of how to continue national monitoring after the project leads. And the project is till 2030, I should have said. Next slide, please. And there are various nodes of this support that we're giving through the National Monitoring Support Initiative. The first, as I mentioned, is the direct capacity development support. But the other parts are what we would have described as the Global Knowledge Support Service. So that's the online provision and increased accessibility of information, data and indicators through various tools, some of which are named on the slide. And the other mechanism that we're hoping to establish through this National Monitoring Support Initiative is a means of connecting our global network of organisations who can support with monitoring through to the parties who are most in need. And that's what we're describing as a sort of help desk, but we're open to discussions around that name. Next slide, please. I also wanted just to highlight that the other decision that's quite key to the work that we're doing is on at COP15 was on 15/8, which is of course on capacity building, where parties to the CBD decided to establish regional and sub-regional capacity building centres, TSCCs. And that network of organisations is responsible or can help with advising countries on various elements of implementation of the global biodiversity framework at national level, and can help with countries to build national capacity for monitoring, among other areas. Next slide, please. And of course, that decision was made after we established the work that we were doing. Next slide, please. That decision was made after we started work on the Global Knowledge Support Service. So we're just trying to think about how best to use and work with the TSCs in this space. And some of the options we're thinking about and us working with the TSCs to better flesh out are maybe providing space within the online service for the expert community to connect with the TSCs, or, for example, to establish some sort of machine learning model that provides support in a timely manner to countries, or directly supports through the organisations themselves. So we've got a couple of options there that we're still toying with, and we will share some of those as we move forward through the CBD process. Next slide, please. I just also wanted to highlight that this isn't a standalone activity that we're doing to develop the Global Knowledge Support Service. And we see this very much as part of the cycle of implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans, or national targets aligned to the Global Biodiversity Framework. So we're responding to these requests of countries for support for national monitoring. And through our work, for example, through the GEF project, on the GEF Early Action Support Project, where we developed guidance for countries to developing national monitoring plans, we will continue that sort of circle of support to hopefully result in national monitoring and review and reporting processes. But underpinning all of this is what we see as the Global Knowledge Support Service. So increasing accessibility of the knowledge that will help with monitoring is key to what we're doing here. And I hope this slide makes that clear. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned at COP16, those of you that may have seen already where we're focusing in terms of the Global Knowledge Support Service, as I said, we're focused around monitoring. And what we're trying to do through the tool at the moment is improve accessibility to the various guidance materials and documents. We're very aware of the fact that there are a range of different tools and products available to support national monitoring. And some of those are the documents that are prepared by the CBD and the Ad Hoc Technical Expert Group on indicators. Some of them are the guidance materials I've just described, developed through other projects, such as the GEF Early Action Support, but also that of the MBSAP Accelerator. Some of the tools and products are those that are actually developed by UNEP-WCMC ourselves. So the target tracker, where you find the metadata for the indicators of the monitoring framework, where you find various guidance materials prepared by the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership, linking, of course, to the online reporting tool of the CBD, and various other inputs and resources that might be of value to countries. So, for example, those tools and resources developed by FAO, the relevant assessments, for example, the assessment that's coming out on monitoring might be of value here. Resources developed by other organisations, including that of civil society, might be made accessible through the Global Knowledge Support Service. Next slide, please. Not sure. And finally, I just wanted to highlight that summary of this work is available as an information document for COP16, and it is it's information document 40, which is available there. So with that, I think I'll hand over now back to Santuri. Thanks.
Thanks, Natasha, for that comprehensive overview. Okay, on to our next speaker. We have Charlotte Field. Charlotte is a lead designer at UNEP-WCMC. She has a passion for functional design solutions, which inspired her to focus her career on user experience and interface design, providing design solutions driven by user testing and interaction research. Charlotte's presentation today is going to focus on the objective of the design-based prototype, the process followed to reach the stage, and milestones achieved in the next steps in the process. Charlotte, take it away.
Thanks, Nansiri. Morning all. So to help you understand the purpose and goal of the tool, I'll start by outlining the problem we're trying to tackle. So this kind of echoes already what Natasha's mentioned. So our project goal is to improve access to and use of data and knowledge, both nationally and globally, to help support efforts in monitoring, implementing and reporting progress towards the GBF. And so the problem we're aiming to solve with the tool is, right now there are a lot of different tools and data sets out there for tracking and reporting on the GBF, but users have shared that it can be tough to figure out which tools and data to use for the job at hand. So our goal is to create a support and guidance tool. It's essentially a centralized hub that helps users easily find the right resources for their specific needs. Next slide, please. So the steps we've taken so far. So our first step was to work closely with the policy team here at UNEP-WCMC to generate proto-personas. So the goal of these personas was to gain a clear understanding of some of the challenges users face when carrying out tasks and how the tool can address them. It also helps us identify any gaps in our knowledge, what we don't know about the users yet, and what we need to understand to make sure we meet their needs. Along with the users' personas, we also developed user journeys, which are helpful in predicting how, when, and where the tool might be used. So from there, our designer Barbara then put together designs and developed them into a finalized prototype, which I'm about to show you on the next slide. We're now currently conducting one-to-one calls to evaluate the concept so far, and I'm sure I've spoken to a few of you already on the call. So the goal is to better understand how the tool supports our needs and whether our involvement should be made for the first phase. We're also using this opportunity to explore how the tool could evolve to better meet the needs moving forward. So as part of the user research currently, so we're focused on one user type, and we aim to do roughly 10 user calls because this helps us dive slightly deeper into some of the feedback, but also it helps us to spot any common patterns or issues. And as for the next steps, we'll be looking to address any of the feedback that we get from the user calls. So to make sure we deliver on phase one. And that will then lead us on to the development in digital transformation, where we will build the tool. Next slide, please. Okay, so here you'll see on the screen, it's a recording of the design prototype. So on the homepage, we've got kind of call to action boxes to link to certain categorized resources. And we've also got this contact us to help support or guide the user to expertise. Just to emphasize, this is a minimal viable product. So it's the first phase, and we'll look to make sure that's nice and accessible, and the usability of it kind of meets the standards for our intended audience. But also to note that kind of this can evolve. Once you go onto a categorized page, as you can see on the screen right now, you can dive down into the resources by using the filtered system at the top. So some of the filters we have are being able to focus on a specific target, as well as a region or country, select a language, and we also have tags. These are representations, so obviously we can adjust them based on what users feedback to us. And some of the resources listed right now are just example resources, and but any feedback on that would be great in terms of expectations of what you'd like to see. And then each resource currently, as it stands, links out externally to the original source. The other elements of the tool is we have a news and events section to highlight any call to actions. And we have an FAQ section for any initial inquiries about the tool and how to use it. And on that note, I will pass it back over to Santhuri for the Q&A.
Thanks, Charlotte. We'll leave the video playing just so, okay. If anybody wants to just have a look at it, a closer look at it. I'd like you to have a look at it and think about how you see the service helping your monitoring and reporting needs, or whatever requirements you have for the implementation of the KMGBF in your country. And we welcome at this point any questions, any points for discussion that you would like to have on the tool. Like I said, your input is invaluable to the development of this tool, so the service. So any issues you have, anything you'd like to raise at this point, we welcome. You're also welcome to put any questions you have into the chat box.
Santori, I've just seen a question in the chat asking us to put a link in the chat box. We don't actually have a live link that people can use at the present time. I'm just wondering how best that people can have a look at this. I would suggest that you have a look at the information document, which I can put a link in the chat for that, and that provides an overview. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way. Thanks.
Thanks, Natasha. Okay, at this point, we welcome any questions, any points for discussion. I see Peter's put in a link for biodiversity monitoring, interspecific genetic level. Peter, would you like to unmute yourself and tell us more about that? No? Miguel has a question. Are there plans to include search by keywords? Oh, Peter says, sure. Go ahead. If you are unable, just let us know and we'll help you.
Just to add a point there to the keywords, that's a really good point. I think if you could advise us on kind of some of the keywords you'd expect to see, we can definitely work with that with our brainstorming session.
Okay, so thanks, Charlotte. There's a message in the chat just let you know. Please put your hand up and we will unmute you for your questions.
So I've just seen in the chat something quite interesting, which is quite right. The Mapping Biodiversity Priorities book has just been suggested, and thanks, Mandy. I've also just seen some other questions coming in. So actually, one of the things that we will establish is some country pages where countries can showcase the work that they're doing with others. And I think particularly for certain regions, this might be quite helpful. And this again is where we may consider a space for the TSCs to sort of be sharing knowledge between organisations. And for South Africa, for example, because they are a national monitoring support initiative partner, and we are working actively with that country, then yes, absolutely, there will be a space for South Africa to share those resources and tools. And I think we just need to think about the design of that as we move forward, because obviously there are 196 parties to the CBD, and we need to just make sure that there's a way that you can easily find that information that is shared by country. So that's something that the design for which we will be evolving as we move forward. But that's a great idea. Thanks so much. And you might like to put a link to the Mapping Biodiversity Priorities book in the chat.
Okay, we have an anonymous attendee that has asked, how can we access the GKSSB website? So as Charlotte indicated earlier, it's currently a minimum viable product, doesn't have its own specific website as yet, it's still in development. And this process is going to help us to develop this knowledge service according to your needs. We have a question. How can nature-based solutions be effectively integrated? Local water management systems to enhance sustainable access to clean water, sanitation under SDG 6. Natasha, would you like to take that?
Sorry, can you say that again, Santori?
How can nature-based solutions be effectively integrated, including things like local water management, sustainable access to clean water? So basically, SDG 6.
So I think again, this is a really interesting point, and it's a thanks so much again for putting it into the chat so I can see it. I think this is a really interesting point because at the moment we're focusing around the Global Biodiversity Framework and the 23 action-orientated targets, but you know, it's really important that we think about common approaches to reporting implementation across MEAs and other processes such as the SDGs. And so it will be, obviously, there's going to be some knowledge and tools that are shared which have application beyond the global biodiversity framework. We have been thinking about how we might tag particular resources for other uses, and that will be a growing space. But yes, absolutely, if there is application beyond the global biodiversity framework, that's something that we consider highlighting in some way, perhaps through some sort of tag in the system. I would also just, there are various pieces of analysis done which look at where data, tools, knowledge, indicators in particular are used across MEAs and other processes. And again, I can put some of that documentation in the chat. But as I say, at the present time, the focus is around the global biodiversity framework.
Thanks, Natasha. Irvin from the ACB would like to find out more about the linkages with the target tracker feature.
At the moment, the plan is to integrate the target tracker, at least make it accessible via the tool. So at present time, it's a standalone entity, and the idea of this will, I'm not sure if we can get to that somehow, probably showing the website, but through one of the resource types, that tool will be made accessible. You can also access the data that is available to us through the online reporting tool prepared by the CBD Secretariat. One of the barriers at the moment, when you look at the target tracker, is that it has limited data for the headline indicators. I think it has data for around 5 headline indicators. And we're working with the organisations who are responsible for collating that data to make it more accessible. And there are various challenges to doing that, mostly resources, but also just making the data, managing the data in such a way that it can be shared externally. So we are working to do that, and we're doing that as quickly as we can. But obviously there are some barriers and some challenges there for us making that data accessible. And we want to try and do this to enable parties to access that data for national reporting, to supplement national data where applicable.
Thanks, Natasha. I think you've answered Kit's question as well from the chat, talking about overlap. So
I also see there's a question on integrating data from other sources, and as I may have mentioned in the overview slide, the idea is to make accessible that sort of information, for example, from GBIF through the GKSSB where appropriate.
Thank you. I'm looking at the question and answer box as well now, and Ayashi is asking, are there any opportunities for collaboration of monitoring tools, leveraging satellite data and AI? That's also very similar.
The tool will be user-led. So should countries be asking for particular types of data, and should it be made available, then absolutely we will prioritise those things that are requested by parties.
Thank you. I think this answers Riqualdo's question as well, who's asking about specific things with regards to his country and information specific to his country. So that will develop as the knowledge service develops as well. So glad to see all of these questions coming in.
Santari, if I might just kind of answer some of the questions in the Q&A. Belma, that sounds great. Unfortunately, we can't unmute the microphones. So if you would like to put some information either in the chat or provide some links, that would be great. So I've answered that question. Then Jorge, thank you so much. That sounds great. And we would, if you want to reach out to us bilaterally, we'd be interested in that and your meeting with the CHM national focal points. the links between the knowledge management for biodiversity and the CBD Secretariat, we are still working this out with the CBD Secretariat. We are in collaboration with the Secretariat in preparing this product. And this particular link, we're still working through that, and we welcome any ideas and thoughts on how we progress that. I think the question on GBIF is probably for GBIF. The question on the headline indicator, I'm not sure if that was a question for us or if it's responding to somebody else. Okay, thanks, Liz. That sounds, yeah, that's really great feedback for us. And I think that we are going to be speaking to somebody from South Africa in relation to how you access the information. And then Charlotte's going to do a more thorough run through for partners of the National Monitoring Support Initiative. So it'd be great if you can give some more specific feedback on the usability of the site through there. And who to contact, if Santori, if you could put an email in the chat, that would be great for Jorge. Thank you.
I'll do that. Antonella is got a question here. Aries, the Thea included is the guide. So I think she's looking for linkages.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it.
So we are getting a lot of interesting tools that could eventually be linked to the GKSSB.
Yes. So if you have a look at the headline indicator metadata, and I'll put a link in the chat in a second. Some of these tools are part of the methodology to collate and to calculate the headline indicators for the global biodiversity monitoring framework, and in particular the SEA indicators off the top of my head for target 1. So I'll put a link to the metadata there, and you can see some of the information related to those tools. And yes, because the headline indicators is where we're prioritizing, we will be sharing information about how you collate those headline indicators via the tool. But thanks so much for sharing, Antonella. I'll just put a link to the metadata in the chat.
Anything else? We'd welcome more questions, more discussion.
Pratik, I don't seem to be able to write to the chat. If somebody could share the message I've just shared in the chat, that would be great. And I think I shared one earlier as well. That'd be lovely. Thanks so much. Okay, so I see a message from Kit on the support to ASEAN countries in meeting their biodiversity data needs. We are in collaboration with the ASEAN Centre for Biodiversity through the National Monitoring Support Initiative, and ACB colleagues, some of whom might be online, are identifying the priority areas for which we will be working in the ASEAN region. So that, as I said at the beginning, the start of this process is to undertake a user needs assessment with the countries specific to their needs, and then to identify for that region what are the priority areas that we can work on with the resources that we have. And so the idea is that we would first undertake this user needs assessment, country needs assessment, understand those specific needs for the ASEAN region, and then tailor support to countries of the region through the ASEAN Centre for Biodiversity. So this is work that's being undertaken by ACB, as I mentioned. Mandy's mentioning the Global Ecosystems Atlas. And as mentioned before, this is a key tool that we will be focusing on sharing through the tool. And I'm not sure, Mandy, where best to place this. So if you can put in the chat where that might fit, or maybe when we have the one-to-one with Sambi, somebody could highlight that to us. Or I'm not sure if we have plans to reach out specifically to Geo, but that could be something we do. And aligned to the global ecosystem typology, which of course helps with monitoring target 1 and indeed is relevant to targets 1 to 8. Thanks, Mandy. Perhaps if there are no further questions, I see some others are coming in. We will just highlight the process again for you, just so that you're familiar with what we're doing. And there is an opportunity, of course, to write to us if you would like to share any of your thoughts on how we move forward, on the content, particularly on the design at this point. So as you're all probably aware, at CBD COP16 in a couple of weeks' time, parties to the CBD will approve or will adopt a decision related to the monitoring framework, and indeed the metadata for the headline indicators of the monitoring framework. We're waiting for those conversations to conclude before we actively start to create this tool and upload information that can be made accessible, because it's a political process, and we don't want to interfere with that, but also because we want to hear what parties in particular are asking for in terms of knowledge and information to support national monitoring. When that is complete, when that process is complete, and we start to further develop the tool with additional resources, we will focus on what you can see that Charlotte has been through here today, and then we will start to think about how we might broaden out the resources subject to national needs. And there will be a mechanism by which countries will be able to provide feedback to us about the type of resources that they need. We'll also be able to see the resources that are used regularly, so that we can identify the ones that maybe are really useful and valuable to countries, and those could be promoted. We're going to be running a series of webinars on national monitoring throughout 2025, particularly on the headline indicators, how to use them, where to access the information. And so we will share that. Those sorts of events will be shared through the Global Knowledge Support Service. We're running this particular webinar because we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we are meeting needs, particularly of countries, to access the information that they need to make decisions at the national level. So please take this opportunity to write to us, either here in the chat or to follow up with us. And we will do our best to try and meet all of those needs, subject to the resources that we have in building this tool. And I think that's probably all I can say at this point in terms of the process. Santuri, do you want to add anything specifically on how we're moving forward with the user consultations?
Thanks, Natasha. So Charlotte, myself, and other colleagues from DT will be running individual interviews. Invites have already been sent out, so if you have received your invite, if you'd please reply, and we can arrange a specific time for these interviews. It really helps when we speak to you as an individual to see how exactly you're going to be interacting with the tool, what issues you would have, what approaches you would take when you are looking for something specific. to address for your NB SAPs or other kind of monitoring obligations. So just keep a lookout for that. And once that's done, we will then be proceeding to move on to the next phase in development of the process. Yeah, so thank you so much for your interactions today. It has been really helpful.
Santuri, I just see a couple more questions in the chat.
Okay.
So Mandy's asking about the boxes on the front page. I mean, you'll probably appreciate, all of you, that there is some overlap between these topics. It was hard for us to think about how we organise the information, and there is some duplication. So, for example, when you click on the monitoring box, you might find information that you also find it's moving very fast, but you might also find information on indicator selection, for example. And we hope that we've got this roughly right, but this is exactly why we're asking for some feedback. And it might just be a case of trial and error in our first round of just putting information out there and then seeing what's accessible and useful for parties. And if we're hearing that the way that we've ordered the tools isn't quite right, then we'll reconsider that, and that should be an easy fix to make. The second question is on the work of the European Commission on a knowledge support centre, similar knowledge support centre. Just to note, Rosalina, this is the first tranche of funding for this. The development of this tool was from the European Commission, and we're working very closely with your colleagues at JRC and within the Commission as we develop the tool as the donor for this. And that is a great question on peer-to-peer learning space on specific topics. I mean, that is something we should really think about for future development of the tool. I really like this idea. I'm not sure if an online space is the best way to do that, but we're open to discussion on that. But yeah, it's a really great idea, and we'd love to hear some more thoughts around how we might do that, if an online tool is the mechanism for doing that, or if there is another way that we might consider that through the National Monitoring Support Initiative. Thanks, Santuri.
Thanks, Natasha. So in closing, if you'd like to be involved in the user testing for this tool, you can send us a notification or an email through the communications email address. And yeah, that's how we're going to be taking this process further forward. And again, it's a tool that is going to be used by you. So your feedback for this is going to be critical in the development of this tool. So we appreciate any and all feedback that we'll be getting from now on. Thank you. And thank you so much for your participation, and thank you to our speakers. Have a lovely day. Night or evening or afternoon.